Okay, welcome. This is the second class of our composition class, and we're going to go over designing your matrix and breaking that matrix into notan and chiaroscuro, and also with the interest in line as well, and how we separate those three components. Okay, here's a photograph of Auguste Rodin. Okay, and I think to me it's a beautiful photograph. For a couple different reasons, and I'm gonna point these things out. It's really interesting to me that if you look at it compositionally, I think it's really a compelling image because you've got Rodin photographed with one of his sculptings, okay, or his sculptures, and here's the sculpture is divided. The sculpture is all chiaroscuro, and it's pretty dominant back there with its strong light and shadow pattern, right? Now you look at Rodin, and he's predominantly notan, or a silhouette. So you get this strong, hard-edged silhouette in contrast to this deep space form sculpting, okay? So what's going on right here? There's a couple things going on. One, we get the contrast between the silhouetted notan shape and the form chiaroscuro of his sculpting. There's also the eye line of the sculpting and the directional line that comes with the garment that comes down towards him. So there's these light shapes on the sculpting that are also directional, but that eye line is really strong. He chose to place the head of the sculpting higher than Rodin. Rodin is in a flat profile, and the sculpting is looking in towards Rodin. So I think the contrast between the notan and chiaroscuro, I think, is important because he's really saying that his work. I mean, to me, if I'm looking at this and reading this composition, this image says his work is more grand than he is. Because it's higher in the frame, and because he's using a stronger use of light on that than he is simplifying himself into this simple silhouette. So what we would call this, the effect of this silhouette or this darkness, is called non-disclosure. So we don't disclose the features in this area of him. We're disclosing them in the sculpting, gazing at him. So it's a really interesting dynamic here. That's why I think it's really important, being a famous sculptor and this being more of a composition that has a statement that the sculpting is bigger than life. It's bigger than the man himself. That's why I think it's just a fascinating image. So how do we look at notan and chiaroscuro? You can see from our basic matrix will change. The image on the left was just a quick demonstration from a model where she was flatly lit. The one on the right was a quick demonstration, same model with a strong directional light source. Down below, what I did is I took the two, put them on both ends, and then in the computer, I merged them, okay? And you can see the one in the middle has both notan and chiaroscuro. But when you separate light and shadow, or the effect of light and shadow, from local values, they can be separated distinctively. But every image that we create is merging the two in some way. That's what I want you to just be aware of, that it's every image that we do is going to be a combination of those two. This image is mostly chiaroscuro. It's chiaroscuro dominant. Now, when I talk about our major key and our minor key, that's when we're going to start looking at our tonal range. Our more dominant value is our major key, or proportion. It's mostly this mid value and a little bit and dark, and then a little bit of light in there. And the minor key is the range of contrast. So that's going to be our next thing. This image is more notan dominant. You can see there's less the quality of form in here, and the local values stand out a little bit more. Okay? So again, I'm really separating these two issues, one of local values and one of form. And I think it's important to practice. This is a Andrew Wyeth painting, okay? And this was one painting that he did in one season, or type of lighting in one season. and then he did the same painting during a different season, and this is what we get. Okay? During winter, it's more of a no-tan scenario. You see that? There's no strong quality of light versus shadow at all. He could have done this on an overcast, hazy day, and we're just looking at the local values that are creating the composition. As opposed to the first one, I'll go back to the first one here. Not only do you see the strong shadows of the moose horns on the wall, but there's a strong shadow cast on the wall from the basket and the table. So, and even the bucket is broken into two values, a strong area of light and a strong area of shadow. I think it was Robert Henry that said, light is no respecter of form. No, that was Charles Hawthorne, maybe. Yeah, he said it doesn't respect form, meaning that light will divide a shape into two parts, into light and shadow. In these images, you can see he really, really pushed the tonal contrast, those local values. There is form in here, but he purposely pushed those local values as a design pattern. Okay? He pushed it stronger than what normally would be there in real life. And that's a choice. That's an artistic choice. So we want to make sure that I want to make sure that you see and notice the difference, and then you can make the choice on what you want to push or pull. Here's a few more images that imply these strong design matrix. I broke those into some of them down into black and white, and the little smaller images down in here. But there's a Zorn painting of the man on the boat with a woman on the dock, and you can see that breaking it into 2 to 3 values makes you see the design pattern. The other one in the middle at the top is Dan McCaw, and that's broken into about 3 different values as well, or 4 values as well. Then there, on the top right, there's a Norman Rockwell painting, and Rockwell, a lot of people will look at his work and go, oh, there's a lot of form in there. But his basic design patterns were pretty much all no-tan, because he lit his models very flat, but he would set up these situations. For instance, and he chose to paint this. You can see the man on the left, the doctor or husband or whoever he is, his white shirt is as bright as the sunlight coming through the window, which would never, ever happen. In a situation like that, he would probably look as dark as a raisin. But the way that he designed the image helps move the viewer's eye around and through the piece. So it's important to look at. The Sorolla painting down below could be broken into a couple of values, and you can see those shapes are leading your eyes through the image as well. The one on the lower left, the boy sitting on the stool, the interesting thing there is where you might think the small features on his face might get drowned out by the pattern. There is a bold pattern on the background, but the fact that it's a constant pattern on the background, the fact that it's a constant pattern flattens it. And you read the face surrounded by a large, flatter area. Okay? So that's really what's going on there, is you're allowed to read it only because it's flattened, because it's mostly the same. It's the same pattern. Okay? This is more of a no-tan dominant because the local values overpower the light and shadow. There is the effect of light and shadow under the eave of the dark wood at the top and the side of the building, but the painting on the walls and the dark value of the wood still stays the greater contrast in the image. The question is, what holds the greater contrast? Is it the local values, or is it the light versus shadow? Which one has the greater contrast? And that's what you want to look for in an image or in a landscape you're painting or in the model you're painting or whatever it is. That's going to tell you if you're more no-tan or chiaroscuro dominant. The dominance really is what has the greater contrast, because that's what your matrix will be designed about. Your matrix has to be designed about that. Okay? So if doing a matrix of this image, you wouldn't include the side of the building in the same dark as the top of the building. It might be a light middle value, and that's it. Here's a Norman Rockwell image, and you can see the one on the left was one of the early sketches for the painting. and the one on the right is a farther developed section of the painting. But you can see that he designed this by its local values, strong local values. The guy's backlit, and the guy typing must be important because his hands and the typewriter are the only thing that really have a strong chiaroscuro. And when you change the design, you can see it strongly on the left because that's where he really kept the influence. When you change your bias a little bit, that is a contrast itself. So when you go from, if you set up mostly one thing, either chiaroscuro or notan, and then you shift your mode, that is a contrast as well. Okay? It's a contrast in the way you put your marks down. Now the audience or the viewer will register that. They don't know why, but they will register it. So that's something that's within your ability to design as well. This is a great example of a clear matrix. The design pattern, and I've divided it in the bottom down here. On the bottom left, I've increased the contrast between the background and the characters, and the characters become silhouettes against this lighter value background that has all this patterning. The one on the right, I've brightened everything up, and so you can see more contrast on the characters, and the background has kind of diminished into nothing. So what that means is there's a large gap between the range of values on the characters and the range of values on the background. And that's what I'm talking about, value grouping. That's when we separate by these value groups. So the background here has a limited value group or range of value. Then there's a gap, and then there's our darker values in the front. Separating those is really important. Okay? There's a Klimt image that has, it's more notan dominant and texture line secondary. Nikolai Fechin, which is more mass dominant. There's a little bit of high contrast form in and around her collar and the teacup, but other than that, it's pretty much flat or notan in design. Here's a Remington image, and the interesting thing about the Remington image is it's mostly notan, okay? Except you see the strong shadow of the horse and the man on the snow and the wall, okay? And that kind of helps tell the story, you know, here as well. So I think I'm going to draw this and just kind of point out, push this over here, and I'll draw this. And you guys can draw along if you want.